Don't skip the money. On the spiritual economy of care. This week marks 200 days since Hurricane Helene and the subsequent wildfires changed the landscape of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And it has been 25 years since I purchased a little red horse named Max and launched a life of teaching, questioning, learning, and recovering in the safety of my herd. Both of these events began with a violent storm, one literal, the other spiritual. So it feels right to mark them both by celebrating my life with Max, who has just celebrated his 30th birthday. No creature has taught me more about quietness, stubborn intelligence, and steadiness. Max is beautifully unflappable, and his 30s, usually a time when horses are put out to pasture, are truly his prime. He is the same horse he was when I bought him at 4 years old, as he was yesterday as a rider brushed him before a lesson. If perseverance was a symbol, Max's forelock would be captured blowing in the wind, like the Ford Mustang symbol, but different. As for the storm, I can't do more to honor 200 days since Helene's passing than Tamar Reno has accomplished as she takes her readers through the landscape and into the narrows of the Green River. Stop what you're doing right now and read day number 200 after Helene, a trail of dogwood petals through the narrows. But put a ribbon on this page or on this recording and come back to visit with me and Max when you're finished. I'll have links to all of that in the show notes. Let's get started. Throw the bones. The day I purchased Max, a 4-year-old quarter horse who went by the name Amos or maybe Andy, I showed up at the farm I've been working at since quitting my real jobs with my checkbook in hand and every expectation of securing a tall, handsome hunter. I stared at him as I cleaned stalls and led him to and from the paddocks. 2 brothers arrived at the farm together, both chestnut and barely saddle broke. They came from the Marshall Tucker Band farm, and while I didn't have much extra money to purchase a horse, let alone pay for his upkeep, the farm owner promised me a trade in the work I was already doing in exchange for his board. I felt in a fate sense kind of way that I didn't have another choice. I was supposed to buy a horse. The 2 brothers were similar in looks, but when I arrived that evening to buy one, the horse they brought out was shorter and solidly quiet like a mountain. It was the other brother. He lacked the fire his brother blew through his body, the showiness that stood him apart. At first, I was disappointed to learn that Max's brother, the taller of the 2, had been sold to a doctor's wife earlier in the day. But I had arrived that evening with every intention of buying a horse, and I wasn't about to be dissuaded by specifics. Max stood quietly as the farm owner held a pack of cigarettes up to his knees to show me how symmetrical and square they were. As he walked through the barn, Max walked beside me, following without a lead rope attached. That night, I fell for every horse seller trick that I currently cover when I'm sitting down with a starry-eyed person to consult and give warnings on their first horse purchase. The reason I know what to expect is because I have lived it, and I still continue to buy horses that are nothing at all like their sales ad. I buy horses like I previously chose romantic partners, captivated by the promise of them and blind to the reality. I'd quit my real jobs because I was housebound with anxiety. I was anorexic and chain smoking and lost. But I knew that I always felt better when I was in a barn and surrounded by horses, so I responded to a classified ad for a stall cleaner without charting my next steps. Max and his brother watched me balefully as I scooped grain, learned to drive a tractor, and revived again like a miniature phoenix filled with rage. It seemed natural to seal a permanent partnership with a purchase that would make me beholden to getting better. That theme with horses has followed me ever since. Horses give me no choice but to change course and keep going. I'm sure it's the same with having kids, but the human variety weren't in my cards. What I knew as I drove away from the farm that night with a four-legged mystery waiting for me in a stall was that I would rise early and begin to assemble a nursery for him. Brushes, a tack box, a saddle, first aid ointments, and salves. I knew that I felt the same as when one drives away with a new car or a new fancy pair of boots, like this purchase was going to take me somewhere. His name was Amos or Andy, but what he was before didn't matter. I would name him something worthy, like Gabriel or Alexander or Maximus. His registered name with the American Quarter Horse Association was Don't Skip the Money. His daddy was the money broker, and his mama was Skip Surratt. Lineage means a lot in the horse world, and I had been raised to believe that I was supposed to live up to mine in a way that wasn't disappointing or embarrassing. But I also knew that I had to read the signs in my body like a fortune teller throwing bones. I had to follow my hunches. Before I could get there, though, I had to figure out a way to pay for this horse to live. Stable Roots is where I share stories about horses, resilience, and the life I've built from both. I write weekly about connection, healing, and the messy, beautiful business of showing up. You can subscribe for free and follow along. A paid subscription goes even further by directly supporting the farm, the horses, and the work we do here every day. However you choose to be a part of this community, I'm just grateful that you're here. Let me show you the inside of the mountains. The first week I owned Max, he refused to take a single step forward. This trait has followed him throughout his life. People ascribe it now to his age and mindset, but he's been this way since he was a babe. That same week, I learned he was a cribber when the farm owner transferred him to another barn on the property after I signed the check. Cribbing or crib biting or wind sucking is a repetitive behavior that's believed to stem from stress, ulcers, or is a learned behavior from the horse's mother. The horse bites wood and sucks in air, doing damage to the structures and fencing and wearing down their teeth in the process. In some horses, it can be controlled by placing a collar around their neck to prevent them from engaging their neck muscles to suck back, while still being able to lower their heads to eat and drink freely. Some horses cannot be controlled at all. I purchased a fancy collar for Max with 2 straps cradling his delicious red ears. Then I wrapped it in sheepskin for his comfort. He doesn't crib at all with the collar on his neck. Cribbing is considered a fault, a vice that turns buyers away. I'd probably carry the same prejudice if it wasn't for Max. I chain smoked, he cribbed. It seemed like a fair trade. Once he decided to take a few steps forward, we slipped past the arena fencing and wandered out to the big back pasture where horses grazed around a pond. Beyond that was the upper field where cows milled and summer hay grew tall. The farm sat at the base of a mountain in a part of the state known as the Dark Corner. I'd grown up not too far from here, but the hills were something I only knew through a passenger side window. The mountains had always cradled me, but from a distance. I didn't yet know how the light moved across the ridgeline from morning to noon to night. I'd been around horses most of my life, but I hadn't yet moved with their rhythm. I hadn't let the workings of the land score into my bones until I quit my real jobs and gave myself over to the responsibility of their daily care. Max and I rode out through the back pasture as the sun dropped behind the peak. I was bareback and helmetless, my hair blowing in the late summer breeze. I watched the tall grass change color with the wind and noticed how the waves flowed like an ocean and how the full moon hovered opposite the last glow of the sun. So far that summer, I had learned the clock of the mountain laurel blossoms and how to spot rhododendrons. I hunted for draping swaths of wisteria in spring, using them as markers to map out my drive from the house to the farm every day. I began filling the empty pockets of fear and anxiety inside my body with the names of native plants. I have this theory that anxiety is just a void that needs filling with something appetizing, something that sparks curiosity and delight. The natural world is filled with wonders made for this kind of work. Max and I wandered through the back field as I concocted elaborate stories in my head. I fancied myself a writer, and I'd quit my real jobs to give myself time to write a book. But I was too busy figuring out horses and how to work with my hands. The stories lived in my head like a secret stash while I stretched my limbs into life. Max and I rode past the pond and traveled along a fence line hedged in lush blackberry vines and honeysuckle. The foliage was so dense we couldn't see what lurked behind it, but Max pricked his ears toward something moving on the other side. We slowed as he studied the sound. The rustling and movement grew louder and louder until something huge emerged in the break along the fence vines. An enormous, disinterested heifer. Max wasn't going to wait around for the rest of the cows. He turned and bolted back toward the distant barn, flying like the races his ancestors had been bred to run. Quarter horses earned their name for outpacing a thoroughbred over a quarter mile. In that moment, Max lived up to his lineage. I grabbed fistfuls of his mane and held on because there was no stopping him. I was either going to fall or finish the ride. As we neared the gate to the farm complex, he eased from a gallop to a canter, then to a trot, then a walk, and then he stopped, just like the early days when he refused to move a step. We caught our breath together as the twilight slipped into dusky shadow, and the mountain stood near us, solid, safe, unchanging. I knew then that the land wasn't just a backdrop. It had held me in its compass. I wasn't separate from it. I never had been. But I still had so many questions. Teaching riding. I had to pay for this horse to live, so Max and I started teaching people how to ride. I wasn't one of those little girls who dreamed of growing up to run a farm, but I loved horses more than anything. I sought them out everywhere I went, ever since my earliest memory of staring up at a big black stallion in a bookstore parking lot where Walter Farley was signing copies of his books. I knew horses would always be a part of my life. I just hadn't planned for them to become the whole of it. Max changed that. I'd proven that I could leave the house and drive 45 minutes to the farm at the base of the mountain day after day. There were a few near misses where my nervous system took the wheel and left me stranded on the side of the road. But if I kept score, it would read Agoraphobia 4, Kim 57. I call that a win. How the riding instructor thing happened had everything to do with Tommy Smith. I met him while I was cleaning stalls one day, and he walked up all sweaty from being in the hayfield and smelling like a warthog, and he commented on how tiny and bird-like my pale legs looked in my shorts. There was a drought that summer. I was hot. We got off on the wrong pale, skinny foot, but the more time I spent around Tommy, the more I realized that he was a bit of a legend of a horse trainer. Tommy loved to talk, and I was a sucker for stories. He watched me bringing Max along. He lurked on the sidelines as I taught Max to move on a lunge line, and how Max threw himself physically on the ground, refused to move, and deeply sighed at my questions. And he gave me pointers as I went. Tommy never told me what to do. He never acted like he had all the answers. But when I was stumped, Tommy would let me keep trying and eventually walk up and say, "I don't have the answers, and I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong. But if he was my horse, I would try." Tommy was rarely wrong. I was combative, book smart, annoying. The beauty of Tommy was that he let me argue, he still does, until I figured it out for myself. The beauty of Max is that he does the same. One day, Tommy told me I should consider teaching people how to ride. I argued with him for a while and told him all the reasons that I shouldn't. He listened and argued back. After a while, we capitulated. And the rest is history. I meant for this to be a single post to honor Max's 30th birthday, but you can't wrap a whole life into one day. I'll be back next week with more Max stories, but for now, a few fun facts to celebrate the horse who made me. Max's career earnings total over $1.5 million, all as a school horse. A judge once offered me $20,000 for him at a hunter show when he was 6. I'm glad I said no. I'm not boasting because that money has never made it to my pocket. Every bit went back into the care and love of this farm. Max has carried this place as much as he's carried riders. He's still going strong. But the old adage about how do you make $1 million in the horse industry? Answer, you start with $4 million, is true. This is not a world you join to make your fortune. But I'm a testament to how living it will heal your heart. Without Max, there would not be a Kim Carter, for whatever that's worth. It took me 10 years to fall off Max, and this is from a rider whose student once said, "Wow, if there was an award for instructors falling off horses, you would win." Max has always had my back. On his back. He spooked once when we were cantering along the long side of an arena. A bird flew up suddenly. He veered to bolt, realized I was not under him anymore, and veered back to scoop me up before continuing his spook. I have done so many things that I am not proud of to Max. Yet he has stood by me through my 20s and 30s when I was nothing but a live, sparking wire of rage and control. Throughout it all, he has quietly and patiently waited for me to wise up. These days, I just live to do him justice, to make amends. And if I had spent the last few decades looking for someone who understood me the way Max does, I could have skipped a lot of heartbreak. The beauty of my life now is this: Christopher and Max are my soulmates. They see the world the same way and ground me back into calmness and breath. This is how horses heal us. We can't see it coming and we don't feel it while it's happening. But when we look back and see how far we've come in our relationship with them, ourselves, and the world, the only thing we can do is take a deep breath and bow in reverence for the way the horses wait for us humans to catch up. This week's post doesn't just celebrate a horse. It unspools a whole philosophy. It's about choosing a path despite resistance that allows us to be healed through new routine. It's about the spiritual economy of care and how a school horse can bankroll the emotional infrastructure of a life. Max and I will be back next week with more stories. Love, Kim.